for the councillors. Good morning, Jane.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I had trouble with the link getting in. I had to join from the browser.
We're glad you made it, Jim. I have the same issue. There were so many documents that came, I wasn't sure which one had it, so thanks.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I think we have both the councillors now. Yeah.
Warren.
Yeah.
Oh, I see
Oh, I'm
Warren
here.
is here. Oh,
I'm
okay.
here. Or I am, it's 5:30 in the morning, so you would not want to see me.
You're hiding your face.
Yep.
Oh, dear.
Okay, shall we start now?
Rajni, do you want to start the live stream, please?
It is started now.
Thank you.
Okay. Good morning and welcome to this virtual meeting of the Board of Directors of the Toronto Seniors Housing Corporation, which is being live streamed on YouTube. In addition to the participating Board of Directors and the interim leadership team, I'm pleased to welcome our virtual audience and thank you for joining us. Let us begin with the land acknowledgement. As a City of Toronto Corporation, the Board of Directors acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. The board also acknowledges that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Since our last meeting in January, Maureen Quigley has stepped down as chair of the board of directors. On behalf of the corporation, I want to thank Maureen for her service and her leadership. Maureen's tireless efforts have helped the organization achieve the advanced state of readiness for becoming operational in June that we will be discussing today. As vice chair of the board, I have agreed to step into the chair role until the City of Toronto appoints a new chair. The process to appoint a new chair has begun. We have a very full agenda today, reflecting the work underway to prepare for the organization to become operational on June 1st. I want to thank the transition team for the preparation of materials brought forward and the board directors for your reading and consideration of those materials in preparation for the important discussions we will have today. We have received one request for deputation in relation to the agenda items on the financial report and transition planning. While our meeting is being live streamed today, the deputant will still be joining us by phone and will not be on the screen. They will be invited to speak to the board for a maximum of 5 minutes. While directors have the opportunity to ask questions, I would ask you to be brief and focus only on matters for clarification. May I now have a motion for the approval of the public meeting agenda?
So moved.
Yeah.
Oh,
Moved by Carrie.
Carrie.
Seconded by
Happy to second, it's Linda.
Linda. Next, the conflict of interest. Does any member has any conflict to declare? Having none, we can move to the next item. That's the approval of the closed session meeting of the minutes of December 14th meeting. Any changes or discussion? Okay, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the meetings of December 14th?
I move.
Yeah, Councillor moved and Brenda seconded. Yeah. Okay, next item will be approval of the closed session meeting minutes of January 7th, 2022. Any changes to be made? Do we have a motion to approve those minutes? I need a mover. Any? That's Brenda is moving and seconded by
Carrie.
Carrie. Approved. The next item will be approval of the public meeting minutes of January 21st, 22.
So moved, Councillor Ainsley.
Yes, Councillor.
I'm happy to second. It's Linda.
Yeah, thank you. It's approved. The next item will be approval of the closed session meetings of minutes of January 21st, 22. Yeah, can I have you? Can I have a motion? Moved by Brenda and seconder will be
Carrie, second.
that's Carrie. Next item on our agenda will be, I think we will be moving into the closed session. So we need a motion to move into closed session. A mover would like to move. That's Jim. And seconded by
Councillor Fletcher.
Councillor Fletcher.
We'll just take Rajni back onto live stream.
Yeah,
Rajni,
a couple
let us
of
know when
minutes.
that's occurred.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
And you're on mute, Rajni, in case you're letting us know.
You're live now?
Yeah, thank you, Rajni.
I'm just switching devices, because I'm out of battery on this.
We are in the public session now. It's item number 15, KPMG, an informational update, audit findings.
Lawrence, I wonder if I could just make an introduction to our guest.
Yes, Norman.
Thank you. So with us today is, and I hope, Rebecca, I say your last name correctly, but Rebecca Nunu from KPMG, a manager on the audit who I work very closely with. And Kevin Travers is the partner, and they're going to present their audit findings report, what they did in the audit and what they found, etc. We'll follow that with a very brief overview of the financial statements, which are in your package. Then we'll move into a closed session for a brief in-camera with the auditors without management present, and then move out of that into public session with the hope that you'll approve the audited financial statement. So that's the process. And I don't know, Rebecca or Kevin, who's going to take this over, but I'll pass it to one of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Norm. Kevin Travers here. I'll make a few comments first, and then certainly pass over to Becky. This is the audit finding report, so there's quite a bit of material in what we're presenting today. However, we only intend to speak to what we consider to be the highlights of the document, and then certainly we're prepared to respond to questions that you may have. Becky, if we could move to the audit highlights page, or perhaps first. Yeah, thanks. So just to speak here to this page within our document, what we'd like to say is that really essentially the work of the audit is done. The items that are outstanding at this point in time are the items that you would expect to be outstanding, and that is completing our discussions with you this morning, certainly understanding that the financial statements are approved. At that point in time, we will receive from management their signed representation letter, and we'll provide our signed opinion. The highlights of the document in terms of items to bring to your attention, in terms of what we looked at, we are required to presume that there are presumed fraud risks related to either controls and revenue recognition. We'll speak to that in a moment, but those are presumed risks. They're not necessarily considered to be elevated in the case of your organization. We didn't note any control deficiencies during the course of the audit itself. Now that's good news, but I like to caution that statement in the sense that the work that we performed was with the objective of providing an opinion on your financial statements for the period ending December 31st, 2021. And certainly as an organization that is in the really in the evolving stage at this point in time, many of your controls will continue to evolve as well too. So certainly as in successive years, I think there'll be more weight that would be appropriately assigned to that statement than at this point in time. There aren't any corrected or uncorrected audit differences. That's also a very good news story. Had we encountered anything that remained uncorrected or that was even corrected as a result of the audit procedures, we would have brought that to your attention today. We can move to the next slide, please, Becky. So just touching on materiality, materiality was set based upon a formula in terms of what's an appropriate materiality benchmark for organizations within your industry, if you will. And it was set at just less than $20,000 in the current period, based upon a percentage applied to the revenues within your financial statements in the current period. You'll see that within this slide itself, there's reference to something called audit misstatement posting threshold, which is $960, which is quite a low number. And what that means is that if we had any error, whether it was corrected or not, that was above that amount, we would bring it to this group's attention. Any error that was noted below that number would be considered to be clearly trivial to your financial statements. However, even with that, just to provide some additional comfort, if we encountered an error of any value, which we thought was either the result of internal controls that were lacking or weren't operating as had been designed, we would bring those to your attention as being an opportunity for strengthening your controls. And then secondly, if we encountered an error of any value, which we believe to be the result of something, say, more sinister in nature, we also have responsibilities to carry out. And certainly there was nothing that came to our attention in that area. So if we could move to the next slide, please, Becky. So the next two slides speak to I mentioned earlier, the presumptive fraud risks related both to management override controls and to revenue recognition. So the standards require us to presume that these risks exist. In the case of the fraudulent revenue recognition, in that presumed risk, we do have the opportunity to what's called rebut that risk, and that is to document why we believe that it doesn't represent a fraud risk. And that was done in this case, and that's typically the case in an organization like yours, because that fraud risk generally applies to entities that are, say, public companies or other large private enterprises where you have an incentive to misrepresent the revenue recognized during the year. It's not the case for an organization like yours, so we rebut that. In the case of the management override of controls, the procedures we perform are designed in order to sufficiently mitigate that risk to an acceptably low level. They're listed on page 6 within our document, and certainly nothing came as a result of us performing those procedures. Into the next area of focus, so if we slide a couple of pages from here, I'm going to let Becky take you through the next part. So this is one more. Yeah, there you go, Becky. That's right.
You can hear me okay?
Yep. Yep.
So in the next few slides, I'm just going to touch on the other areas of the financial statements that we focused on. The first one was cash. So cash, and looking at the materiality levels that we had in the financial statements, was a material amount, so we had to test this. So we did this by sending confirmations to the banks to confirm the numbers that you had in the financial statements. We also looked at the reconciliation statement that had been prepared at period end to see how appropriate it was and any controls that was implemented whilst they were preparing that. And we didn't have any issues to note testing the cash. And the next area of focus was revenue and deferred funding. And revenue, in line with what Kevin said, was very simple. This was one stream of revenue that came from City of Toronto, which we were able to corroborate from the correspondence that TSHC had with the City of Toronto. We had no issues with that. We verified the computation that came with the deferred revenue, which is mainly the unspent funds that came from City of Toronto. We didn't have any issues to note on that. On account receivable, we reviewed the computation that backed up the HST reasonableness, and we didn't have any issues to note. On the next slide, I'm briefly touching on accounts payable and expenses. For expenses, based on the materiality levels that we had, we selected samples and traced to their supporting documentation to see how accurate and complete they are. And for accounts payable, we instituted cut-off procedures by looking at if liabilities have been included appropriately in the financial statement for the period that we are looking at, and we didn't have any issues to note. And lastly, I'm going to touch on how evolving TSHC, because it was incorporated in June 2021, and largely the financial records have been manual. That's what we observed. And normally when it's manual, it's very prone to errors. So we had instituted some level of procedures to check the integrity of the data to ensure that all errors have been accurately addressed. We didn't find any errors based on these procedures that we performed and the internal controls that have been instituted. We looked at how transactions have been initiated, have been approved, and how they finally end up in the books of accounts and then the financial statement. We didn't have any issues to note. And in line with this, we instituted the element of unpredictability just to select some items that are below our materiality threshold to see if there is anything that will jump at us in terms of errors. And also we tested the validity of vendors that have been used for the period that we are looking at, and we didn't have any issues to note on that. So that would be the end of my presentation. And in line with what Kevin said, we didn't have any misstatements for the period we audited.
Yeah, and thanks. So the appendices we'll take as being read. There's a great deal of content within there, and certainly Becky and I'd be happy to respond to any questions that you do have. And we do want to thank Norm for all of his assistance during the audit itself. So this is a new organization moving forward, and so there's a lot of questions getting things set up and moving it forward. And Norm was very responsive and provided us with great information as we move forward. So with that, we'll pause to see if there are any questions.
Any questions? Any questions for the auditors? Seeing none, Norman, probably can move to you. Oh, I think Brenda has a question.
You're on
I think
mute.
probably you're on mute.
Sorry, just to thanks everyone. This is our first audit, right? So bravo, and thanks particularly to Norm operating in this mushy area of setting up an organization, and your diligent efforts are appreciated.
Oh, thank you, Brenda. So maybe I'll just move on to item 16, and recognizing we're a little bit behind in time. You have a briefing note and the audited statements in front of you. And as Rebecca and Kevin mentioned, this is a clean audit opinion. We are prepared, or I am prepared, to sign off on the management representation letter, which is one of the outstanding items for the completion of the audit. The financial statements, there's statement of financial position, which is the balance, otherwise known as the balance sheet. And it really represents having assets of a little over $500,000, much of that in cash. And then I think the other key item there is on the liability side is the deferred grant revenue of $342,000, which the city has agreed to let us carry forward and use in this current fiscal year. And then the statement of operations, otherwise known as the P&L. You can see there's the bulk of their revenue is from the city grant. You recall we received $985,000 from the city. We've recognized just under 650,000 of that. The balance is deferred, and the expenses are noted here, roughly the same amount. And then there's a statement of cash flow, which reconciles those two statements. And then there's a series of notes to the financial statements. Many of them are standard in nature, which includes a COVID statement at the end, which is standard for audits that I've seen since March of 2020. And the last thing I would note on the briefing note itself is that these statements that have now been audited were very, very close to what we presented to you as draft at the January meeting. Just a slight adjustment to our expenses and deferred revenue. And so I think with that, there is a motion attached to this briefing note to recommend to the board that they approve the December 31st, 2021 audited financial statements. But the next step in this process is for the board to, subject to any other questions you have, is for the board to go in camera with the auditors for a few moments to see if the board has any questions or comments, or the auditors have any questions or comments. This is a standard practice, good practice. Following that, coming out of in camera, then the motion can be tabled as part of the other in-camera motions for approval. So I'll, I guess, turn this back over to Lawrence, and would suggest that management exit the meeting for the time being. And if Rajni could let us know when we can come back on, we'll rejoin the meeting. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Norman. I think Brenda has a question.
Yes. The revenue we have to date is a grant from the city.
Correct.
So going forward in June 1, with transitions completed, what will be the sources of our revenue? The rental income that we get from tenants plus a city grant that's apportioned to us?
That's correct. That's correct.
And does the city grant come on a monthly basis, or is it prorated in some way, or?
The city subsidy, for the current year, starting in June 1, I think we'll be working with the city to see if and I think there's been some general early discussions that perhaps they'll advance several months worth of that subsidy to give us some cash flow support. But I think on a regular basis, the subsidy comes monthly, I think, but I can't honestly say, Brenda.
Okay.
We will be looking for some early cash flow of that subsidy. That subsidy for community Toronto seniors housing would be in the neighborhood of $30 to $40 million. A subsidy for the entire Toronto community housing is about $250 million annually. And if we represent roughly 20%, 18 to 20% of that activity, we'd see roughly 18 to 20% of that 250 million.
Okay.
The cash flow, we're still have to work through, but we will be asking for some perhaps advance, which I understand is not out of the realm of possibility.
And the subsidy, is it based on, not per diem, but per client? Like we get so much money per resident, or is it based on some formula, or?
There is a
Paul,
formula.
Paul, can you, if maybe
There
you
is
can
a
answer.
formula, and it's driven by a formula of what is deemed market rent, and there's a rent geared to income, and it is done by building and unit, and then the delta between the rent geared to income calculation and market rent, and that market rent is also formula based.
Yes. Yeah,
is the funds that the city provides.
so they provide the gap.
They
So-
provide the gap. I mean, it
Yeah.
is an evolving formula. I think this formula is in its maybe second year now, or maybe third year, but it's been an evolving formula.
Is the budget, we haven't got a full budget yet, have we? Is the budget designed on the basis of market, what we would get from market rent for each unit minus the tenant rental contribution, and the remainder, the residue, is what the city provides us?
That at you know, at 50,000 feet, that's probably a good definition.
Sorry?
That's a high level good
Yeah.
definition. The issue is what is the defined level called market rent, and that market rent is also formula based.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like Paul has a comment.
Thanks for that. And I think, Norm, as you quite rightly point out, moving forward is a bit different than where we are now.
Yes,
So looking
I
at the
realize that.
statements now, none of that is related to the existing rents and TSHC work. This is all the work of the Seniors Housing Corporation, which is
Right.
progress payments, essentially. As you need resources, we flow those resources. So what it will become June 1st is a bit of a combination. Some will be the already approved budget for 2022 for TCHC and the portion of the buildings that would be moving over. And then
Right.
there would be an incremental portion, which we have to determine how to handle in 2022 for the additional costs that TCHC does not have at the moment. So we'll work through those in the best way for 2022. And then in 2023, that would be the first full year that
Yeah.
a full budget for the Seniors Housing Corporation would move forward for consideration by the city of Toronto. So, and just, to give everybody comfort, I mean, right now, as we go through, it's as needed. There are resources that would be flowed to match with needed expenditures along the way. And we'll continue to do that for those incremental pieces that would not be covered by what's being transferred from Community Housing Corporation.
No, I just wanted to get an idea of the budget process and the,
This year will be, just to conclude that, Mr. Chair, this year would be a very atypical approach to it. And then I think it would be wise at some appropriate point closer to June to perhaps have a bit of a presentation on the budget process. So again, this board is
great.
aware of what a
Great.
a normal budget process will look like, because ultimately the board will approve the budget it submits for consideration to the City of Toronto, but it's helpful to understand our process so that you can do that well. And then the other side of that is, I think it would be an excellent opportunity for the city to go through the subsidy calculation and how that was arrived at. To Norm's point, this is early on in a new process of how we determine that level of funding for those units. So I think both parts, Brenda and others, would be useful for you to know a little less for the next couple of months, but certainly as you move through the summer and into the fall and start to create the budget for submission to the city, it would be really helpful for us to bring our financial folks to give you a sense of the process that we do follow.
Great, I appreciate that, because
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul. May I have a motion to move into closed session now? I need a mover.
So that will mean management will leave the meeting and come back shortly.
That's correct, yeah. Brenda is the mover, seconder. That's Linda, I believe, yeah, Linda. A mover, Brenda, and seconder, that's Linda.
Can you just let us know when we're live streaming again, please?
Yes, Michael. Just a minute.
what number in the agenda are we?
We'll be going to
22?
22, yeah.
Actually,
22.
we're going to have to go back to 16 to approve the audited financials, and then we'll go to 22.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Oh, yes.
So we are in the open session now, Rajani?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
you are, yes.
So it's item number 16, approval of the audited financial statements.
So move.
Brenda moved
Carrie,
and
second.
seconded by Carrie. Yeah. So we will be, next will be, okay, item number 21. We needed a slight amendment to that. Right?
Yes, I have already amended it. If you see at the last part of the sentence, I will put it up again shortly that I have
Okay.
amended it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, okay. I need a more for this motion.
So move.
That's Warren.
And I'm happy to second, Linda.
Yeah, Linda seconded.
Sorry,
Okay.
what was that?
I think that
That was the item
conversation, yeah, that took place, Brenda, when you were
Yeah,
offline.
Oh, sorry. And what was it again? Sorry.
it was on the governance policy development. So amendment is in consultation with the City of Toronto. The last few words.
That's Mr. Dinner.
Dinner, yeah.
That's Mr. Okay, sorry.
I think we have already approved audited financial statements. So we'll be moving to item 23. That's matters arising action item list.
We need to.
We have a few more to approve.
We need.
Yeah.
We need to
Okay,
approve
sorry.
the items that were in the first part of the closed session, Lawrence.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This is for the initial hiring approvals.
Oh, yes, yeah.
So we are in agreement. A mover for this motion. Where are we having?
So moved. Carrie,
That's carried. Yeah. And seconded by. I need a seconder for this
Happy to
motion.
second, it's Linda.
Oh, Jim, sorry, I mean that Jim.
Jim also had his hand up. Thanks, Jim.
Okay, thank you. Approved. Do we have any other motions from the closed sessions?
illegal.
Yeah, there's one. Okay. So for the contract approval for the legal firm, for the legal services.
I'll move, Linda.
Linda moved and the seconder, seconded by
Carrie, second.
Carrie. Yeah, Carrie.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, is there a need to specify the name of the organization, or is it just in
Since-
general?
Yeah, since it's a public thing, we discussed
yes.
it in the.
I understand. Okay,
yeah.
I understand, yeah.
So then we are moving to item 23, action items list.
Yeah. Mr. Chair?
Carrie?
Yeah, I'd just like to note that there is an outstanding item on this going back to arising from our June 30th meeting. It's the list of tenant reps. TCHC maintains they have a list of either elected or not elected or building representatives. And STAC has asked for this, other tenants have asked for this, and they've been stymied at every opportunity. And I just wonder if, I don't know, Paul, if you can bring any influence to bear, or if Maureen had tried and sort of ran into the same roadblocks. But it's causing some frustration because some people seem to be contacted for focus groups and engagement activities, and others don't seem to be anywhere, although they are very involved.
What's the hesitation in sharing the list?
Maybe
Not
I can
knowing.
comment here. I suspect and just remembering back, the issue is with respect to our corporation, these are not our tenants.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think, and we're currently relying on Toronto Community Housing with respect to connection with tenants for things like focus groups with respect to transition. So I can undertake to check again with Toronto Community Housing on that issue, but I suspect it will be to do with issues of privacy and the fact that these are not yet our tenants.
Aren't they elected to these positions or were chosen in some manner? So that's a public record.
Yeah, the
I'm not
election is a
sure.
bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Within Toronto Community Housing, but I'll check up again on this issue.
Thank you, Michael.
Can I follow up on that, please, Lawrence? It's Councillor.
Yes, Councillor.
Thank you. The tenant engagement model that would have delivered whatever tenants are currently engaged as elected reps or however they did it is, I think, been pulled out. The seniors has been pulled out separately. There is a public list of buildings, which I think, Michael, it was very easy to get because they're publicly reported at TSHC. And I believe, and Paul, you could confirm, that what our board said is that this board, this corporation will determine the model of tenant engagement. So those tenants are engaged now at TSHC in whatever way, but that might not be the form of tenant. We can go back and look at that, decide if that's the model that suits this board. I'm pretty sure I'm right on that. So it's a list of things. That's a public document, and there are many public documents that exist on reporting out. As I've mentioned quite a few times, last year, before I was on this board, I asked TSHC to start delineating, pulling out seniors so that when this board got going, that information would be available. It is publicly available, and perhaps that now's the time to start accumulating some of that for board members to be able to understand.
Thank you.
And I agree with, they're not our tenant reps. They're not our tenants yet.
Mm-hmm.
Gary, they're
Yeah.
TC. But the process is something that should be reviewed with
Mm-hmm.
a working group that you and Linda are on, and the information as to which buildings have these reps at TSHC is publicly available. There is many more publicly available information. And I guess now's just the time to ask Michael about that information and when we would be getting that.
Yes, we have all the information with respect to the buildings, the list of the buildings, the
Really hard.
process.
Maybe it's just me, but you're very faint.
I'm sorry, Councillor Fletcher. Yeah, we have all of the information on the list of the buildings. It's just the personal tenant information that we do not have access to.
But the board doesn't have that yet, correct? Or has the board been?
I'll have to go back and check, but the list of buildings has been clear from the start, actually. But I'll check if that hasn't been furnished to the board prior. We'll make sure that we give you that list of buildings.
No, we have the list of buildings. It's the tenant reps.
It's the list where there are people in place.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Plus, there's other reports that are senior specific, and I'm going to ask when we can. I don't know how hard that is for. I don't know who that would be. That would connect with the corporate secretary to ask for those, whether it would be Rajni or maybe Arlene. I don't know, or Monique. But those should be easily available to us just to be able to see what that operation looks like. We're not in charge, but those are public documents. Nothing is secret there. I think that would be quite helpful for us to have. So out of this conversation, I'd like to request.
Those.
It's important too for your consultation processes
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you and Linda, I think, are on various meetings or whatever and focus groups. So if some people are being invited but not others,
Yep.
then you're going to create bad feelings.
Well, and just overlook some geographic areas.
Yeah.
It's yeah, it could be problematic.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for raising that.
Any other comments? Okay, then we'll move to item number 24. That's the report from transitional lead.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. And I'd just like to start by acknowledging Maureen's contribution to the work to date. I know we did that, Lawrence, you did that, but I'd like to do that as well on behalf of the transition team and me personally, just to say thank you to Maureen for her tremendous work, leadership and guidance. She's provided tremendous support for the transition team and for me personally to get to the position we're at now with the corporation and looking forward positively towards transition. So thank you, Maureen. I'd also like to just thank the transition team and our partners at Toronto Community Housing as well. As you can see, we've got a tremendous amount of work going on the transition on June 1st. And this month, I would say, and next month are the really key months for us in coming to agreement as to how the two corporations are going to work together through the transition and afterwards. And also a big thank you to the board, because I know there's a tremendous amount of material for you to review and to provide guidance, support, and oversight for the work that we're undertaking, so that we can make sure that we achieve the goals of this transition on behalf of tenants and on behalf of the City of Toronto. And I think we're making excellent progress towards the completion of the work that we need to have ready for the transition on June 1st. You will see that in the risk report that Mary is going to present later, that we have changed a couple of the areas from green to yellow. And that just reflects, I think, the complexity of the work that is underway right now to make sure that when we come to the boards, both corporations in March, with draft term sheets for the lease agreement, for the shared services agreement, and for completing the operating agreement with the city, we of course have to ensure that everyone is on the same page with respect to those agreements, and so that we can move forward in a positive way. So that work is continuing right now, and we're not quite there yet, and that's why we reflected those as yellow, given the timeline that we are coming to both boards in March with agreed to term sheets for those very important agreements. Though those discussions are very much aligned to the principles that the city has set for us in making sure that this is successful for tenants, is minimally disruptive to tenants and to staff, and minimizes the additional costs that may be incurred as a result of creating this corporation. And certainly that's our spirit that we're going into these negotiations, and I'm sure Toronto Community Housing is as well, so that when we do bring forth those agreements, that you can see that those principles were adhered to in the drafting of those team term sheets and then our subsequent agreements between the two corporations. We also want to make sure, of course, that those agreements set a solid foundation for the new corporation to achieve its goals on behalf of the city, which is to continually strengthen the quality of seniors housing in the city. So many goals that we have to meet at the same time, and doing it in the most cost-effective way possible, and making sure that those agreements reflect that. So I'm very pleased with the progress we've made to date. We really are in the thick of the work, the detailed work with Toronto Community Housing at the moment, and I'm confident that we will be able to bring forward directions that the board will consider, and hopefully both boards will approve a positive way forward as to how the corporations can work together in the best interests of seniors tenants, and of course thinking about all of the tenants currently within Toronto Community Housing as well. So I think I'll leave it at that, Lawrence, and we've got some detailed looks at the planning coming later on with Mary's reports, but happy to answer any specific questions that board members may have.
Thank you, Michael. Any comments and questions? Thank you, Michael. I would like to commend you and your team. It's a tremendous progress. It has been systematic, methodical, incremental, and really hats off to you.
Thank you.
Shall we move to the next item? That's item number 25. That's approval of conflict of interest policy.
Mr. Chair, I'm very pleased to present today the conflict of interest policy that has been reviewed quite carefully by the Corporate Governance and Human Resources Committee. The recommendation is being made by the committee to the board that this policy be adopted, and I can say that it has been amended to incorporate recommendations from individual board members, and it's been certainly a difficult process to develop this policy, and I commend the City of Toronto for providing direction as to their expectations. And I think this has led us to the point where we are today, where this policy has been presented for consideration by the board. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Warren. I need a motion to approve of this policy.
Just have to ask Warren what oversight there was from the City of Toronto, please, Warren. Thank you.
The input was certainly requested from the city as to what their expectations were for the policy. And the city confirmed that since our corporation is a corporation that is governed by the Ontario Business Corporations Act, that the provisions in the Ontario Business Corporations Act dealing with conflicts of interest should be complied with by the corporation.
And have they signed off on this?
I have seen an email to that effect.
Could you provide that to the board, please? Mr. Chair. I think I'd just like to, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, just until I see that, given the amount of discussion we've had on this issue. I don't want to go into more here, but I would like to ensure that it's been sent, that we're kind of in compliance, and that that's been signed off. So I don't think that's asking too much, waiting for a month. That would be, appreciate all the work committee, but to me, that's the final piece. And I would appreciate the support of the board. Given
So, Councillor, you're suggesting we defer this?
Why are we deferring this?
because I see the email that you have, Warren. I'd like the board to have that so that we've closed that loop.
I don't know, Councillor Fletcher, if it was sent directly to me or to Maureen.
Well,
perhaps we have a city of Toronto representative on the phone, don't we? On this meeting?
No,
Yeah.
I think I don't know if they're here. So if that was sent to Maureen, it would just be helpful to have that resent to Lawrence then, because this is a.
I see actually no reason to defer this matter.
I
It's
can't-
long overdue. It's I find this absolutely incredible.
Pardon? I don't want to get into a long protracted discussion, but I, on this issue, would like to see if Maureen got that sign off, then that would be very helpful. So I don't see the problem with, it's been on the hopper for a while in simply deferring that. So I am satisfied and other board members are satisfied that we're completely in compliance with this. That's
Compliance with what, Councillor Fletcher?
Well, just that the city is lawyer that works with all the corporations has seen this and says, yes, it fits well, or missing something, given the amount of time we've spent on this issue to date.
The email, I believe, came from Mr. Johnson.
As a member of that committee, I wasn't aware of that either, so.
I'm not trying to be difficult. I too have been through quite a journey on this one, so I simply would like to see that. I don't think it's asking too much, or send it to the committee. That's fine. Next meeting. The next board meeting is coming shortly.
I'm not in a position, perhaps, Mr. Chair, you have access to Maureen's emails? Michael?
No, I don't.
Maybe I could comment here if it's helpful.
Yes, Michael.
So I'm not. I know that there's been a lot of back and forth with the city, particularly in the context of making sure this is compliant with both city expectations and with the Ontario Business Corporations Act, to the extent I think that this conflict of interest policy, which was originally based on a template of the Toronto Community Housing policy, that this has gone back to Toronto Community Housing also for their consideration because of course of the parallel nature of the two corporations. So my understanding is that the city are comfortable with this, but I'd have to check with respect to if there is a specific sign-off by the appropriate person at the city, other than those discussions that I'm aware of. So I'd have to find that, or make sure that that was done, if that's requested by the board.
What's the opinion of the other members of the board on this issue? Should we defer, or should we approve subject to?
Oh, we could approve subject to confirmation from the city, Lawrence. That
Yeah,
might...
I think. I think if we can take a little extra time to put this fully to bed. You know, we're in a lot of transition here, a lot of things on our plate, but I want to make sure that this policy is understood, it's consistent, it meets the needs of our collective cooperative relationship with the other board. I'd just like to, if we need to take the extra time just to put it to bed. I mean, I added some suggestions and that were incorporated about the role of the tenant directors, because I was concerned not to make them hidebound in their representation and advocacy from the position of tenants. And that was incorporated. And I don't know if people understand how important that was, because we attempt to put people on boards that are representative of the groups we're trying to serve. And then if we have rigid bylaws that inhibit their fully communicating, fully advocating, and fully representing their the colleagues that they're supposed to be representing, then it almost undermines our efforts to be accessible and open. So I added that concern because I've been in positions where we've asked people to sit on boards and then they've been speechless or silenced because of Robert's rules of procedure and various ways that we manage to silence people. So it's an important document, and you know, I think it reasonably sets out the issue of affiliates, sorry. And the extra step of just getting concurrence by the city, I think might help put some of this to bed. I don't know, Paul, if you have any particular comments or not.
Yeah, Paul?
So just in terms of what's happened already, you know, through the chair, so there were a couple of questions asked as we were developing this policy related to Chris's visit to the board. And so I was able to confirm that this follows what, you know, the suggestion by the city manager was that that there needed to be a conflict of interest policy created, which you are. And then I was asked subsequently, would Toronto Community Housing be asked to put similar language because we're affiliated with that? And the answer to that is yes. On that language, you know, certainly we can have legal review it again. It's unlikely they would approve anything because some of it is suggestion. And I would note that you did take the suggestion of our legal counsel, which was that this be an annual piece when it comes to the affiliated membership, that's an annual piece. So certainly that is directly in line with the advice that was provided by legal. But again, it's really up to you to do it. But in terms of the whole policy, if there's a eyes on to review the entire piece one last time, that can be there, but it's the board's to approve. So what it would be is advice as whether it follows in concert with what they would see as a reasonable policy. That can be achieved, but in terms of an approval email, I'm not sure that's what was asked for, but that wouldn't come. What it would be is that this is a consistent policy with what they've seen from other boards and corporations.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think, Lawrence, you had an idea that we could approve this in principle and ensure that it's consistent and reasonable with other policies, and simply ask that Paul to have city legal say yes. I'd be happy to do that today. Don't want to hold everything up, but
Okay. Michael?
want to make sure that we do that.
Yes, thank you.
I was just going to agree with Councillor Fletcher. I think an appropriate step would be to approve this and to instruct, and I'm happy to undertake this with Paul to ensure that then it has the eyes of the city on it, that they are comfortable with it. I agree. They can't provide approval or sign off formally on it, but and then I could report that back to the board at the next meeting that has occurred, and that we've got confirmation that this meets their expectations of the city.
Yes,
Thank you.
I'll move that, Mike.
Yeah. Can we may I have a motion to that effect?
I'll do that. Thank you.
Pending, it should be added, pending review or something.
I wouldn't put it as pending. I would just say that subject to a follow up with the city to confirm. So there wouldn't need to be a subsequent approval by the board.
Just a sub report by you, or
yes,
something.
A report by me back to the board that the board is comfortable with.
Yeah, thank you. Nothing was right. Long time. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lauren, for getting us to a good place.
Seconder Lawrence, I'm happy to second.
Yeah, okay. It's seconded by, moved by Councillor Fletcher and seconded by, it was Linda, right?
Linda, yeah.
Linda, okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, shall we go to item 26 now? That's tenant engagement and communications update. Arlene.
And I'm just conscious of the time, Lawrence, whether you want to adjust anything with or with respect to the remaining items, which are all informational, how you'd like to proceed with the rest of them.
We can have a brief summary probably, or how do we go about it?
Perhaps we could extend for 15 minutes. Can we extend for 15 minutes? Is everyone okay with an extension?
We have a deputation as well, do we not?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wonder if we should prioritize the item, Lawrence, for the deputation to allow that to occur.
Yeah. in that
Mr. Chair,
case-
sorry to interrupt you. This is Rajni. The deputant has informed me that she doesn't want to depute for item 28 any longer. She will depute for 27 only.
That's an
Okay.
approval item, Lawrence, which is on the delegation of authority. So I would recommend we deal with that item first. We'll
Okay.
be able to allow the deputation to occur, deal with the approval item, and then see what we have time left for on,
Yeah.
on the agenda.
Okay, in that case, we'll move to item number 27, approval of delegation of authority for June 1st, 2022. No, Norman.
So I think we're going to start with probably the deputation.
Okay, yeah. Slide, okay. Rajini, so,
Go ahead. Hello.
yeah.
Mr. Chair, we have Maureen Clohetsy, the
Yeah.
deputant, Go ahead, Maureen.
Oh,
Thanks,
good
Rajni.
one.
Thank you all very much for giving me a few moments this morning. In relation to item 27, I'm not going to be making inquiries around the actual delegation of financial authority, which is what the bulk of this refers to. But I'm definitely concerned with attachment 1 that has the list of all of the different roles and the comparison between Toronto Housing's management roles and Toronto Seniors Housing management roles. And it states here that it maps the current TSHC positions to planned TSHC positions. And my questions are around, I guess, first of all, who made up this list? Because Toronto Housing has been known for being rather top-heavy with management, while there has usually been a consistent shortage of frontline staff. Now, this list seems to have close to an extra 10 members of management, more than the TCHC list. So I'm wondering why it's such a long list. I'm also wondering, well, again, who did the planning for this? Who put this list together? I know that this is not the type of thing that all tenants would be involved in, but as a staff member, I think it's important to have a better understanding of this and a better understanding of what the roles and the job responsibilities are for each of these management positions, for a couple of reasons. One, as it stands now, management is very untouchable ivory tower. And two, management departments don't necessarily connect well with each other, which is what you've heard Bill Roman refer to as the silos. So I would like it very much, whether it be Michael or whoever created these roles, to call perhaps for a stack working group to review some of the descriptions of these roles before any hiring is started, so that we can tweak it a little bit to make it more tenant-centric for the new corporation rather than just corporate-centric. And so that we can make sure that these roles include an understanding of how their decisions actually impact the front lines and the tenants. So would that be possible to have a further discussion on this?
Any questions or comments? Brenda.
I don't know who to address it to.
I don't either, yeah. Who created the roles?
It kind of parallels some of the earlier concerns I expressed.
Yeah.
Michael, is there any response you could have, or?
Happy to make a comment here, Brenda, and through the chair.
Go ahead,
This
Mike.
delegation of authority issue is one of timing here, where we need to have the delegation of authority levels in place with respect to the systems that we're going to be working with through Toronto Community Housing. So The precise titles of individuals either reflects the titles that are in place currently within the staff complement that's coming over from Toronto Community Housing to here, or prospective titles with respect to the levels that will need to have in place for the delegation of financial authority for the new corporation starting for June 1st. And I'll ask if Norm wants to comment any further, but we're going through this process now so that we can make sure that the systems are functioning well with respect to the business processes, understanding that we're very largely going to be using the technology platforms, business process platforms that are currently in place. Norm? You're on mute, Norm.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, the roles that are identified on Schedule 1 or Attachment 1 are for the purpose of mapping potential new roles, some of which the board, I think, has endorsed this morning, and some that are yet to be approved. Because the system that we'll be using, that is called Yardi, and it is a fully integrated property management system at community housing, everything is geared to its use through 3 primary activities. One is structure. One is what cost centers people have accountability for. And one is what delegation of authority do they have. So that the system will track the approvals and the charging of costs through this delegation. We know what cost centers we want to establish. We are proposing a delegation of authority today based upon a structure that has yet to be confirmed, but we know that certain positions are required in order to move forward for June 1. And so the logic, it's a logic model that allows for new positions some of which are going to occur at Toronto Seniors Housing, to be mapped to the same levels of delegation at Toronto Community Housing. And so it's really just a mapping of roles so that we can use the systems for June 1. These 3 components that I'm referring to, structure, delegation, authority, and cost centers, are fundamental to the implementation of the system for June 1. We are 14 weeks from live. So this is critical to have these understood, and that's why the mapping is there.
Any other comments or?
Couple comments. I think the issue outstanding here is the information provided to STAC and other tenant representatives. And I sense you're asking for some sort of meeting where these things could be explained. I mean, I don't know where we're getting into operational matters versus policy, but is there some way we could share some of this information in a way that will allay either people's concerns, or at least address them, or at least speak to them? I mean, I'm cognizant of trying to understand that some things are operational and may not be the purview of the consultative process, but there is a point of information here. The concern expressed here is the desire to make sure we're not top heavy with management and underfunding of direct service staff. I don't know if we have the answers to that yet, but I think some general information could be provided, I would think, I would hope, or I would suggest, to a meeting of the tenant representatives and STAC. It's an important concern. Whether we can answer it right away, I'm not certain, but I think it'd be wise to share it, so we as a board are aware of these concerns.
Lawrence, if I can just jump in too from a
Thank you.
engagement committee. So I think it's a really good point in terms of like some further conversation. I think our model of the staffing model and the leadership model, which has not actually all been finalized, would be good to go back to the tenants. I think what Norm was trying to say is that there are some positions that we need to actually have in place now that, that probably we can't go to a group and get consultation, but the larger model of how we're going to structure the role of the directors, and actually, Maureen, this has been a conversation that has happened at this level too. Our board has actually said we don't want to replicate exactly what TCHC has. And we want to make sure that actually that we have a lean, effective model that does actually have, as they say, boots on the ground and people that are responsive, and the right balance of having people that are accountable and leaders, but lots of people that are actually leaders doing the work and being responsive. So I think we should follow up and figure out the best way to actually keep the dialogue open with the variety of tenant groups. And I know Arlene's been doing some of this work as well, and her consultations with people. This is actually mirroring what people are saying at other consultations, I believe.
Thank you, Linda. So, Michael, do you have any comments, or Arlene?
We're happy to go through the remainder of this item and then have the discussion with the board around their approval of this.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you, Maureen.
Mr. Chair, I didn't get the woman's full name. Wasn't on our agenda. Her name is Maureen what?
Clohessy. Clohessy.
She's appeared before us before, I believe.
Several times.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and she's a member of STAC.
Yeah.
So are we going to go ahead?
If we could make sure her name is in the minutes or something, there should be some documentation that she was presenting.
Yeah.
So are we going ahead with the approval of this motion, or are we going to defer it? Or is it just a communication issue? Yeah, no?
I would propose that this is an item for approval today. It is well, there's two things that, I mean, there's the deputant request to understand a little bit more about how we're operating and how the organization's emerging. The attachments to this document, however, are delegations of authority that are being proposed for June 1 that do two things. One is they mirror the levels of authority with Toronto Community Housing, and one of the key principles that we've tried to do as we try and implement these systems or work with these systems is as little change as possible. So even not changing the delegated levels is important. And so what these attachments reflect is the delegated authority levels that currently exist within Toronto Community Housing for a whole array of activities, whether it's approval to spend, sign contracts, transact business, bank, et cetera, et cetera. And so the mapping is to allow the system to say, in Toronto Seniors Housing, this function has the same level of delegated authority as this function. And so since, for example, we do not have vice presidents in our structure, but we may have director levels within our structure that report to the CEO, then those director level positions at Toronto Seniors Housing would have the same delegated authority as a VP at Toronto Community Housing. So that's the logic. And so we've gone through all of this process, including the mapping, to allow when we do eventually use the system and work with Toronto Community Housing through this service level agreement to be able to transact our business effectively. And so that's what this is.
Yeah, no,
A current delegation does exist for what was a smaller organization, largely around approvals at a certain dollar limit for Michael and the chair and vice chair, etc. And so this is to be in place for June 1 to allow for the functioning of the system within the folks that we have working with us. And many of the SHU people will continue to use the system as they do now. And so then when the new CEO comes on board and we've sort of worked through the kinks of the structure, and the delegation could then be relooked at sometime next year. And so this is to allow us to move forward for June 1. And so it's a resolution for the board to approve this delegation for effective June 1.
Thank you, Norm. So may I have a resolution now?
just a quick question. The 500K level of authority, is that what, I mean, I know you're saying it parallels the existing TCHC, but that seems high. I don't know, is that my misunderstanding, but $500,000 approval?
These are the levels that currently exist at Toronto
I
Community
understand.
Housing.
Yeah,
And with 14 weeks to go to live date, to create another stream of approvals could jeopardize the implementation of the system for June 1.
and I don't want to do that, but I'm just raising that as a concern. Maybe we can come back at some point in the year to and I'm thinking in terms of audit risk and financial risk. I mean, when you give people large amounts of money to approve, you do increase your risk. So I'm happy to vote for this as is, but I would just like to note the need to review the upper end of those levels.
And I think, Brenda, the briefing notes speaks to the fact that once the CEO is in place and we run things through, there'll be an opportunity to relook at that. And then talk to community housing about how we change the workflows within the system to allow that to happen.
Yeah, I understand. Okay.
Thank you, Brenda. So shall we have the motion? Okay, I need a mover and a seconder. Brenda moved, seconded by, I need a second, seconded by Jim. All those in favor?
Yeah.
Any opposed? None approved. Now we have got two pending items now, in the sense, we are out of time. Should we extend the time or should we defer those two items? Item number 26 and 28 to next meeting.
Do we need some action or are they just reports?
These are for
both information items.
Information items. It's already in the package.
Is there something either one of the staff, Arlene or Mary, need to inform us of or would like to inform us of?
I don't think there's, if the board members have read the package, if there are any specific concerns or questions, we could have those now, and happy to follow up with individual board members also after the meeting if there are specific questions that you might have.
I'm personally happy with it. It's just the communication piece I thought was important, and if we could just spend a few minutes on that, because I think it's a reflection of our brand and how we want to operate, and it's our outward facing face. And I just thought it was important to at least look at it with some staff direction.
Yeah.
I'm happy to address.
Carrie, you have some.
Yeah, I just wanted to say before, sorry, Arlene, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but your posters were wonderful. Your posters advertising the focus groups were clear, they were concise, they were eye-catching, they were better than things we've seen at all. One of the concerns is that only 23 people out of nearly 15,000, not that you'd expect that, but participated in these focus groups. So it just speaks to the enormity of the challenge of getting people involved. But good job.
Thank you, Carrie. Mr. Chair, may I address the committee?
Yes, I mean.
Board, sorry. Yes, thank you, Carrie, for that feedback. And I'd like to recognize the work of our colleagues at Toronto Community Housing in getting those posters designed and getting them up. It was a tremendous amount of work, and I detailed all of the communications work that was done in the event to try and get more participation. We're delighted with the 23 tenants that did take the time to come out, because we were able to have very rich conversations, conversations that were documented in real time and shared back to the tenants that participated with the follow-up survey. So I feel that we had good conversation, and the depth of that conversation will be coming forward to the board through the QT committee and then to the board at the next meeting, so you could see the recommendations that the tenants that did participate, the recommendations they're making around the top priorities for Toronto seniors housing moving forward.
Great.
Thank you, Carrie.
Can I also add, it's not necessarily a bad reflection of us, but I think it's a cumbersome process. And what I would like to suggest, not only in terms of staff, but also perhaps our board committee on tenant engagement, that we look at models and methods of communicating and engaging people. You know, asking people to come to focus. I mean, that's one step, but it is a cumbersome step. And maybe we're not getting the results we want because we're not quite using the right tool.
We do actually, I acknowledge that statement, because the basis for the consultations was the phase 1 ISM survey, which had almost 40% participation rate. It was also conducted at a time where there was no COVID, where COVID was sort of just getting off the ground. People were actually able to meet face to face in the seniors population that we're working with. They have much more value in the person-to-person interaction rather than the virtual space. So I think that's one of the challenges certainly that we have been encountering, but we do continue to forge on and try to be responsive to people as they reach out to us. But certainly in the constraints of public health measures at this time, we continue to work through the virtual space.
And also in terms of the ISM, the integrated service model, I'm sorry, I'm having problems finding your report page number.
148, I believe.
Okay, there was some, I think there was a mention of future consultation work, I recall, on the part of TCHC, is it?
For the ISM, yes, there is some work that's being undertaken with the city, actually. It's particularly around the fourth leg of the stool for ISM. Yeah, they're
and are we involved with that, either as participants or observers?
I believe it was late last week. We would have sent a note to the board advising that Health Commons has been procured by the City of Toronto to do that.
I saw that.
And so there's some outreach to a few specific board members, but anyone that is interested in participating in that consultation and for adding their voice to the conversation, please do let me know. I'd be happy to connect.
I would be, because I've mentioned this before, my interest and concern on the integrated service model and the style and method of proceeding. And I know and recognize that it's TCH's initiative, but at some point we're going to have to be responsible for the follow through of what is decided. So I always feel garbage in, garbage out. If you don't advise and consult properly at the front end, then you'll get results that may not help direct you at the back end. So I would like to suggest our board members that, you know, express an interest, and I certainly do, in the Commons folks, Commons Lab people folks. I believe we're on the list of people they're going to speak to.
Yeah, they're going to be at our Quality and Tenant Engagement committee meeting next week, Brenda. But
okay.
Yeah, so if you want to, you know, you're welcome.
Oh, okay.
They'll be presenting at the Quality and Tenant
Yeah.
Engagement
Oh,
Committee to provide an
okay.
update. But if any board member would
Yep.
like to participate, happy to bring that forward.
Please do. Please
I will do,
dive
Brenda.
into that. Yeah, I appreciate that because
Thank you, Arlene.
the whole raison d'etre is, this integrated service management in the city city council will be very, very attentive to how we're progressing on this.
Right.
Because as counselors, they often are the first call of complaint of what's going on. And I think we need to be cognizant of that. And while we can't fully direct it, we should try to participate in it and massage it and move it along.
I'll be sure to let them know that.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Arlene. Michael, should we be looking into any other items, the pending ones?
I suggest we take them as read, and if there are any specific questions, either for Arlene or Mary, I think we could.
Thank you, Michael.
Michael, did we need to do anything, and Mary, any decisions that needed to be? I mean, this is quite a detailed report, but was there anything we needed to approve or act on? Or was it mostly for our information?
Mostly information.
The planning material is for your information.
Okay.
Would just draw your attention to the transition plan item, which outlines, which is,
where are we?
It's item number, information and update on the discussion, number 28 on the transition plan. And just to say that included in that presentation is what the board can expect to see at its upcoming meetings, including the proposed orientation session. So in answer to Councillor Fletcher's question about when you will be seeing various things, our projections on that is available to you in that document. So you might want to have a look. If there's something missing, please let me know and we'll work on that.
And that board orientation. God, I'm trying to find it. Sorry. I'm scrolling through here and I can't find the number.
We haven't yet scheduled it, Brenda. We're trying to schedule that at the moment. It will be likely around the 3rd week of March.
Okay. And the topics for that orientation will be what, the planning?
Well, the topics are an introduction to Transition Day, just because I think you need that as background. An introduction to the service delivery model, which I think people have been clearly anxious to see. And then an introduction to the operating agreement and the term sheet for the lease agreement and the term sheet for the service delivery agreement. The last 3 of those you will be asked to approve at the end of March, and we really wanted to give you an opportunity ahead of time. Great. So that is a key month. The month of March is really key in terms of moving these critical things forward. But also, just so the board knows when you can expect to see various items, it also tells you when you can expect to see all the various policy items where we're going through the TSHC policies and updating those. So the plan for all of the policy approvals is also in there.
All right. Yes, I did read that. And Michael, the status report that we're preparing for the executive committee, preparing for council through Paul, what's the date that that's supposed to be finished?
The scheduled date at the moment is at the end of March. I think it's the 30th or 31st of March, that executive council meeting. So unless that changes, we'll be working with Paul for him to finalize his report and providing information, some of which we've provided to you in this report in terms of the type of information that we'll be providing to him for that.
And do we receive the final report on our end before that meeting?
No, I think Paul has indicated today that that's not the normal practice, but I'm not expecting, any surprises, and we'll certainly be working with him in terms of the information he needs.
What I meant is not Paul's report, but our report.
It's not our report. It's a city staff report to the executive. We do not provide the report. We'll be providing information that city staff will use to develop that report.
Okay, and so the status update, the suggested content are the areas that will be addressed.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much then.
Thank you.
I'll just intervene here. That'll be a public report and it'll be on the, I'm assuming it's public unless parts of it are confidential, but it will be posted a week before the meeting. So everybody will.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor.
good, thank you. All right.
So it's time for adjournment. May I have a motion for adjournment?
I will make a motion, and Lawrence, I'll thank you for a very well-run meeting, stepping in first as your act.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. So we need a mover. Oh, that's Councillor Fletcher and
Carrie
seconded
seconded.
by Carrie. All in favor? All in favor? Adjourned.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you all. Thank you all of you for the time.
Bye.
Have a good week, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks to all of you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, Karen.